Hello, everyone. It's me, Andrew. I'm here in my home in our office in lovely Ligonier, Pennsylvania. And this is the second time that I'm on today. So if you didn't catch the earlier live, I kind of previewed and talked about what this project is, and I showed you a little bit of collage work, some of the things that I use to make the glue that I use in my collages. And I talked a little bit about working with Elizabeth Brim, which was a really amazing and awesome experience, and why I'm doing this fundraising kind of project in the first place. So if you didn't see that, you can catch the replay. I'm sure I will talk a little bit about it again because I have that broken record tendency. Um, so yeah, I've been working pretty nonstop since we last checked in, and it's kind of a mixed bag. I was very fortunate to work with an artist in New York City named Victoria Kahn. Um, you may recognize her name from the Pinkalicious books, in the Pinkalicious play and Pinkalicious toys. And she is a very amazing illustrator, um, and very creative. I had her for a collage workshop. And one of the things that she told me, one of the lessons that she imparted was don't be afraid to murder your darlings. And that may sound weird, but it's this idea that sometimes we create this idea of preciousness around a material or an image or an idea, and that preciousness can create a barrier, like a force field, that prevents us from going further with that work. And so the idea is sometimes you have to kind of not be afraid to let loose and maybe ruin something in order to make it better. And sometimes it seems like it. I'm going to show you some examples of things that I made off air, and you may be like, "Whoa, boy, what you done did." Um, but I think I feel happy with the progress that I've made. There's still a lot more to do yet, and I haven't even gotten into kind of the illustrative phase of this. I'm still working on backgrounds, but I think the more richness that I can bring out now, the better. So earlier, I didn't really talk too many people, but I'm just going to check in and see how everybody is. If you're watching, say hello. Let me know where you're watching from. I always like to see because, boy, am I greasy today. It's a warm day here in lovely Ligonier. It's a beautiful day. We have the windows open and the cats are kind of lazily sauntering about. But yeah, let me know where you're watching from. And yeah. All right, I see Teresa's watching. Hey, Teresa. Cindy's watching. Hey, Cindy. She said she shared and liked. Thank you. As William is apt to do, he always reminds me that I should encourage people to like or thumbs up and share the videos. Um, I really am excited about this project, and I hope other people are excited too. Um, it's one of those things where I enjoy making paintings. I've always, I mean, I went to school for it, and I love it. But I don't always get a chance to do it as much as I would like. And I mean, there's a balance. I do it more regularly now than I have before. Maybe within the past couple of years, I've been more serious about my painting. And so I've been making more paintings in the last few years than I have than the 10 years before that. So it's good to get back into the swing of things. And I think that that's one of the reasons why this is kind of important to me, is because I recognize the importance of practicing and having those materials so that you can do the things that you want to do. And so you can level up your process and your creativity and your practice. So if you didn't know what I'm talking about, I'm thinking of calling this series Wild and Precious, um, but we'll see. I'm not sure yet about the name yet. I see some more folks watching. Norma's watching. Hi, Norma. Kara's watching. Hi, Kara. Or is it Kara? Kara or Kara? Um, Susan's watching. Hi, Susan. You're not very far from us. And my neighbor, Susan, she lives across the street. Amanda's watching, and Cindy's watching from Miami. Awesome. So part of the reason why I'm doing this series is to help fundraise so that I can take a workshop with Stephen Yusko, who's currently at Penland teaching, and he's a Cleveland, Ohio-based blacksmith, and he's really cool. He finds different kind of found in his practice. He finds like found object pieces and then uses those natural patinas and weathering and incorporates that into his work, and has a very beautiful kind of modernist, slightly Asian inspired vibe. He's going to be doing another kind of basics class. But one of the things I've learned from taking different classes, particularly basic classes, is that everybody kind of focuses on different things. And for me, whenever I'm learning something, I like to turn it around and turn it around and turn it around and turn it around in my mind and come at it from different angles so that I can better understand it in a very kind of in-depth and conceptual way. Um, I know that's not for everybody. Some people like to just, learn one way and that's the way. For me, and maybe this is like a ADHD, whatever those letters are kind of thing, where you kind of look and go down these research holes and you start looking at things from different perspectives. And I don't know, but that's the way that I kind of learn. And so for me, it's really important, um, especially as I am kind of more seriously going after this metalsmithing knowledge. One of the things I kind of realized is that the jewelry world is kind of like one side of the coin. So they talk about things in very small scale and for non-ferrous metals, so non-iron based metals. But then on the other side of that coin, there is another world of kind of the blacksmithing and the metalsmithing and sculpture and different things like that. And each of those things has value. And I think that they inform one another. And in kind of the old processes, because I was looking at um, this guy who went to Japan to learn how to do this very specific um, metalsmithing technique, and it was for like some sort of jewelry or something. And what he had to do as an apprentice, very old school way, is he had to make his tools first, and then he went in and um, after years and years, then he did the thing that he wanted to learn. And I think part of that, not all of us have that kind of time to do what he did, or the ability to, up and leave your home for years at a time. Um, but one of the cool things I think about that is by working and making your own tools, you have an intimate knowledge of what those tools can do and how those tools can uh, um, affect the finished result on a very, very personal level that you don't necessarily get when you buy it and it's somebody else makes it. Which there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that you have. For me, I like to learn in a very square one and build up and kind of understand it from that kind of way. So yeah. So yeah, so that's kind of the whole um, mission for this project, this fundraising project, is to raise money for the class and to get equipment so that I can practice, and of course some supplies to practice with. And so whenever I do these, I try to make a series of affordable artwork so that I can, not burden down the business, and I can feel good that my artwork has contributed to me learning more things and creating a space that I can learn more. All right. And then hopefully and as a byproduct of this, um, whatever I learned then can be shared out through these lives and through classes that we do and through workshops and through the studio that we're putting together. Um, so for me, it's one of those things I'm learning so that I can teach, but not necessarily so specifically that. I don't know if that makes sense. I think there's something very good about pursuing knowledge for the pursuit of knowledge and enriching yourself to be enriched and to learn things so that you can learn them, not necessarily so product. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting a little bit wild with my talk, but I think that that's kind of like, we're so focused sometimes on the end product, what we get, that sometimes the sheer joy of just learning is kind of bypassed. And at the end of the day, I want to go through these experiences and enjoy them and deepen my relationship with metal and my craft and why I do things and internalize those things on a very human level. All right. So that's me. So this is part two. If you saw part one, or if you didn't see part one, we talked a little bit about collage and repurposing old work. I'm going to show you in this part, I'm going to show you, oh, the numbers dropped significantly all at once. I don't know what happened. Anyways, I don't really look at the numbers. I just kind of monologue, for better or for worse. So anyways, yeah, so I'm going to show you how I'm adding the next layer of these pieces. And I can show you some of the pieces that I've worked on since I last checked in. And you can see the process. Now, whenever I show in process kind of things, I always like to say, when you're looking at these things, especially when I'm telling you specifically that they are in process, don't get overly committed to this, that, or the other thing. And the reason why I say that is because there are times when I've shared in progress pieces and people are like, oh, don't touch it. And don't, I want it just the way it is. Or, they insert this kind of voice that stifles the flow of my vision and what I want to do. So just be aware that none of these are finished and that they are very much in progress. And you can share your opinions, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to do them. And I hate to say that because it kind of sounds kind of like I'm being a butthead, But the thing about that is I have to follow my artistic voice, just as how I encourage you all to follow your artistic voices. So if I ever seem kind of like hesitant or I shut something down, it isn't because I'm trying to be mean or that I'm trying to like be the know-it-all or whatever. But for me in my own artwork, I have to do things a certain way, and that's just the way it is, unless I ask for opinions or feedback. But I'm not doing that right now. So, anyways, let me flip this around, and you can kind of see what I've been working on. All right. So if you saw the last video, then, ooh, all right. Then you saw me make these backgrounds. I think I might even have made, I think I made this one on camera. So, and this one has been ironed, but I still need to go back and probably do it again. And every once in a while, I'll grab a stack yay thick and I'll bend it this way because they naturally want to go the other direction. And you can actually see them. I don't know if you can, if I hold them, if you can, if they'll do it, but you can actually see them move, which is pretty wild. Like when you think of like paper and stuff, you probably don't think that it like moves by itself. So if you don't know what this is called a gel press. And you know those little sticky hand things that were in gumball machines in like the 80s? And then you like stick it to the wall kind of thing. That's what this feels like to me. I don't actually know what this is made out of. It's some kind of uh, um, sticky gelatin type material. And what this is designed for is to make monoprints. Um, and that's what I've been kind of doing. I've been really intrigued by this tool, and so I've been playing around with it and experimenting with it. And if William's watching, he can throw up an affiliate link for the gel presses. These are not too expensive, and they're really fun. Of course, if we post an affiliate link, we get a little kickback. We get maybe like 5 cents if somebody buys something. We don't currently sell these, but maybe one day. This is super crusty because I've been using it nonstop. But one of the things that I do or I like to do is I don't like to clean it too much while I'm working. And the reason why is that like all these little crusties and all these little, whoop, you can see it, all that kind of stuff that's left over then becomes a part of the artwork. So it's kind of cool because I don't like things um, when I'm working in this way, which is very kind of loosey goosey and very much kind of experimental. I don't like things to be too pristine. There are some people who like very clean lines, very clear color saturations. They want everything to be a certain way. For me, I'm kind of experimenting and playing and letting my creative muse kind of um, go wild. And I don't want things to be too clean or pristine. I want it to have those little crusty bumpies. And if it gets too bad, I can always wipe it off and wash it off. Like I've been picking, you probably see that I've been picking on the side. And that's because sometimes the paint will run down and I don't actually get to use that paint. Well, maybe. Here, let me. Um, Waist not wanting it, right? What do we got here? We got a little bit of pink. And actually, that's all dried up. Anyway, so I've been experimenting with the gel press, and I've been making some different. I've been making some different kind of textile prints. Um, and so I don't know if many of you people know my background of how I kind of got into crafting. But my family didn't have a lot of money, so they did a lot of crafty things. And we come from a long line of quilters and crochet and a lot of fabric techniques. You could there are some of my favorite quilts that are in our family are things that are made from leftover um, pants and shirts and things like that. And those things were used, and whatever wasn't used, and they would use for like rags for cleaning. And then those would be used for fuel for fire. So there was always like a purpose for it. Like if you got something, it got, it went through many different phases and uses until, you know, you got a lot out of it. And I've always kind of come from that mentality of wanting to use that. But one of the things that was very deeply saturated into my brain was fabric. So for me, I love fabrics, and I love how they're the patterns and the feel of it. And for a long time, well, maybe not a long time, but um, for a while I was in college, I had a sewing machine, and I did a lot with art quilts. And these are definitely there. They are loving hands of home. They're not anything that's gonna win a contest or a prize or whatever. But for me, I was thinking of the fabric as kind of like brush strokes, and working on developing almost like a painting as opposed to um, necessarily a functional quilt. So I would mix things of different fabric weights, like knits and silks and things that you normally would not want to sew together, um, because they can kind of like droop and tear and do different things like that. And I would use zigzag stitches to kind of hold things together. And one of my friends, who was actually like a real seamstress and a real quilter, she was like, "That's like she called it the poor man's stitch." And I kind of fell in love with that idea because of where like my origin kind of like my family on my dad's side are all from the Ozarks, and they were very poor. And on my mom's side, she immigrated from the Philippines, and they were also very poor. So whenever there was this kind of like the poor man stitch, it kind of resonated. And so I kind of used it purposely. So, anyways, I did experiments to create these kind of textile, like um, the textiles. This one I would probably add another layer, but these are kind of samples that I did on different pieces of paper to figure out the different layers that I wanted to achieve. And so I really love these kind of scallop shapes and spirals, and almost like a wood grain or topography, or even like um, um, Japanese papers and different things where there's like that repetition of pattern, circles, and this kind of outline shape. And so I did a lot of samples, as you can see, and some of these are like real built up with how many different layers I tried to achieve with this. And these ones, and then I also use the backs for kind of like to clean the brayers off. This is a brayer. You can see I didn't really clean it off very well. But I like this kind of opalescence and how this kind of the buildup of colors kind of gets created. Harry said those remind me of old bookend papers I have. Yeah, I could see that. That's a usually those techniques are called marbling, and that's a really cool thing where they would take the different paint in inks and things, and they would take these tubs of water, and then they would squirt all this stuff on the top, and then take a quill or like a toothpick or a skewer or whatever, and then draw and drag this through and create these kind of really wonderful kind of like Mazzoni chevrons and different things where there's shapes and it kind of that dragged in and that marbly effect. And then you would dip the paper in the water and then lift it up, and it's kind of like a dye sublimation. Where that then would be transferred to the piece of paper. So I can see that. I love books too, so I could definitely see that. But this is kind of like the experiments that I did to create the next kind of layer. And this one you can't see as much because I went over it with that metallic. But I kind of feel like after this metallic, I'm going to go over with a matte. And it's going to have a different kind of look. So, and then who knows, one day I might use these in backgrounds. But these are just the samples. All right. So these are some of the pieces that I did. Earlier, you saw me add the collaged elements. And then on this, I've added kind of the prints on top of those collaged elements. And sometimes it comes out real ghostly like this, where there's only part of it shows. And then other times it gets really intense on there. And again, this is only the first layer on top, and I'll probably add at least 10 more layers or so to each of these, if not more. And some of them kind of look yuck, but that's okay because it's way early in the process. And when I say yuck, it's kind of like sometimes the contrasting colors are very jarring, and or it muddies what's underneath, or there's little giblets that are kind of flaking off. And so it's all about kind of, for me, it's about this experimentation. Like if you make the paint really thick, and it squelches kind of on there, it creates this kind of really cool, almost like an artery. It looks, or like when lightning strikes wood, it creates this pattern that kind of this is like this spidery kind of botanical look to it. So yeah, so this is kind of the earliest layers on this, and you can see that I'm doing 3 at once. So I'm kind of randomly, kind of not randomly, picking pieces and then putting them on and doing 3 at a time. And the idea of that is that if I do 3 and then I have them kind of in a similar color family from the collage, then when I go and do this layer of the paint, then it's like it becomes a variation of the collage kind of color palette. And then from those 3, if I then do 3 different ones with that, then it turns into each one becomes more unique. And then when I go on top of that, then you'll see how it kind of will branch out. Does that make sense? Like, some of these look very similar because they were in the same kind of pressing, but then they'll become less similar when these are in a different one and this is in a different one. And so I'm kind of experimenting with this. I am thinking about color and building up colors. I'm thinking of patterns and how I can relate patterns to one another. There are certain design motifs that kind of stick in my kind of aesthetical. That's not a real word, but it kind of sounds like it should be. But my aesthetic kind of like wheelhouse. And so there are different colors. You can see how I've got this kind of citrusy greens and oranges and yellows, but mixed with this turquoise and this, like these burnt oranges and aubergine with the overlay of an ochre yellow. Um, and you can kind of see it. Again, I'm building up layers. I'm creating that archaeology of textures and colors and prints, and it's interesting to me. So I hope you all are enjoying that. I'm going to show you a demo real quick on how I get this pattern. You have to work kind of quick because if it dries, it doesn't always want to play nice. Like this one doesn't look like terribly much, but once you add another layer, it can bring out some of those yellows in the background. And I haven't decided if I'm not going to take some sandpaper to them and remove some layers, build the layers up so that I can remove them. It's all just kind of an experimentation at this point. But I thought I would share how I get those. All right. I love this gel press because it's another way, it's another tool in the toolbox. Everybody kind of uses it differently. So I think that's pretty cool. I think it's pretty fun. I'm by no means an expert at it. I kind of recently got it. So I've just been playing around with it mostly to see. And yeah, all right. So the thing that I'm going to do now is if I was trying to do something very specific and very clean and modern, no kind of patinas or whatever, I would wipe this down, give it a good wash, and start fresh. But since I actually like this, I'm going to keep it. So I've got this golden fluid acrylic. It's really good because it's saturated in pigment. It flows, and you'd be surprised how little paint you actually need. I don't like to waste, so I've got a bunch of paint that I've got these wherever you clean off your brayers or you clean your print or your press. I keep those and then I can paint on top of those. I think that like I with these pieces, I like that those layers of paint. So I would never throw that away, and I guess that makes me a little bit of a hoarder, and that's fine. Because it could be other things that I hoard. So, like I said, it doesn't require a ton of paint. And I don't like it to be too runny or too loose. So some of the thicker paints will help with that. And if I have a little bit of paint on the end of that, then I just twist it on here and clean it off directly onto the print. I take my brayer. I try to keep a dirty brayer and a clean brayer. This is the dirty brayer. And if you make your layers too thick, what happens is it's gonna uh, leave those kind of spidery marks. And that's not necessarily a bad thing in my mind, but it's not necessarily the ideal that a lot of people try to achieve with their gel press. And I'm just going to clean this off. And I'll keep that. Don't worry. And then I actually took the end of this paintbrush because it's smooth and it doesn't have any jagged parts. And I'm just drawing with it. Every once in a while, I'm going to remove some of this excess that's built up on the surface. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but as I'm dragging this tool around the gel press, I'm removing that layer. So if it gets dry, it's not going to necessarily stick. It will stick to like a printer paper, but to the collage surface, it's not going to want to behave. So you do have to work kind of quickly for me. I know that for some people, this might be like glacially paved. But you know, everybody works at different speeds. I was never really good at silk screening because I was too slow when I needed to be fast, and I was too fast when I needed to be slow. So I never got really good or proficient at silk screen prints, even though I really enjoyed them. I really enjoyed the look of them, and we actually collect a lot of silk screens. But I was never really good at it. So my timing was always off. So I'm just creating these spirals, and I'm not being super duper careful. I am being a little bit careful because I do want to create a certain pattern. And if I don't, do it, then there won't be a pattern. So I am being a little bit particular in that way, but I am not getting too bent out of shape if it's not perfect necessarily. I'm actually going to create some marks here and there so that so it's even less perfect. All right. And then what I'm going to do is take this piece that we made earlier, line it up, and I can do about 3 of these at a time where there's a complete surface area coverage. Now, if I wanted to do just some at a time, I could do just some at a time, but this way I can actually make progress. That's one of the hardest things about this process when I'm doing one of these 100 series is that it's easy to fall down the rabbit hole. And then the next thing you know, you spent 2 hours and you've only done one piece. And then logistically speaking, it's just not a way to do that and be able to do it in kind of an affordable way. I also find pieces like this with a smooth bottom that I can burn it. Excuse me. Generally speaking, you want to start from the middle and work your way out. So what I'm doing is I know that there's 3 pieces underneath this paper, so I'm going to be working like this. All right. And it may have dried too quick. This one look dirty, y'all. So this kind of looks messy, but that's all right. It's completely fine. Again, there's a sense of kind of experimentation. And if I want to intensify the colors, what I can do is go back over and do a little bit thicker. And this is well and truly dry. It's all about getting that paint level kind of the right consistency for it to make a kind of a beautiful print. And this does require a lot of paint because I usually work in very thin layers of paint, and this is kind of like you glop it on flavor. So it's just a different way of working for me, which is kind of exciting, you know? Sometimes when you do stuff and you do it over and over and over again, it's not that it can get tedious or that it's not cool or whatever, but sometimes it's fun to do something different and it can kind of push your creative boundaries a little bit. And so I think it's fun. And I don't want to mix it too much because you can go over and over this and it can kind of blend the colors. The more you go over it, the more it gets kind of mixed. I don't want to mix it too much because I like that kind of marbling. And I actually do things like this where I can kind of create different textures in that. And I'm going to clean this off because I don't want to get my brayer to the point where it won't move anymore. And then I'm going to come over here and go back over and do that kind of pattern. And what I've learned is that sometimes these patterns, for me, they're just things that I doodle a lot. And they're things that I've been doodling for as long as I can remember. So I think like there's arabesques that I kind of draw, and I think those are cool. I love the idea of like topography and map making and these kind of being these maps of our psyche and our artistic creativity. And I think that there's something wonderful about that. Um, and one of the cool things is that, as some of you know, my brother, he went missing for 22 years. And so he was not in contact with the family at all. And so it's kind of interesting to see how different and how similar the kids are because he's an artist as well. And so when he was gone, he would make these designs, and the designs looked a lot like some of the designs that me and my sisters also made. So there are things that like we would make these like swirls that were kind of slightly thorny. And all of the kids had that. All of the kids have that in their artwork somewhere. Sheila, sure, her stuff is not as much. But if you look at my work, particularly, or Cynthia's, you can sometimes see it, which is pretty wild. Um, because also, when I was making artwork, it was I was in New York City, and Sheila and Cynthia were in Ohio. So, and they went to different schools, and still that kind of form language was kind of embedded in our psyche or whatever. And the cool thing is there's actually a lost written language in the Philippines, and I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, but it's called Babian. I actually had a doll that we called Babian, and it very much looks similar to that, which I think is pretty cool. So things that we don't even know about are, embedded in our minds. I was attending this symposium, and one of the presenters was talking about epigenetics, where it's like these things that we know on a genetic level, but we don't know on a practical level or on a something that was taught. It's kind of like there inside of you. And they've done experiments on chicken hawks and chicks. Like they would take the silhouettes of chicken hawks and these birds, and they would put them over the shadows, the silhouettes, over freshly hatched chicks, and the chicks would run for safety. And these chicks had no contact with their parents or other older chickens. They were freshly hatched, but they would run for safety when they flew this kind of silhouette over their heads. And they did this experiment with other shapes, and they would just kind of hang out and not move. And I think that's so cool. Like if chicks have that, how come we don't, or I think that I think we do have that. Where within us there are these things that are embedded. So there's that. What do y'all think of that? I like that. It's not going to translate as cleanly to the collages. I mean, it's pretty clean, but it's not like onto the flat paper. And so I'm going to set these aside and let them dry so I don't get them everywhere. Like I said, you get that kind of squishy texture. And I'm just staggering them. And we'll see what I can come up with. If it will do it or not. And if paint gets on the backs, I'm not super concerned. I know there are some people who are like super critical about having their artwork, the backs of their artwork being pristine and stuff. That's not me. I live in the rural world where I have cats and different things like that. And so things get messy sometimes, and it's on the back. I don't really care. You're not going to see it necessarily. So if there's a little smudge of paint on the back, it's not going to be the end of the world for me. I actually paint the back sometimes because for other reasons. So I think that one actually, I like that a little bit better. And that's very abstract, which is kind of cool to me. And so I have this kind of all on this plate. I'm not going to get rid of that. I'm going to do colors on top of that for the next go round. And this one's a little bit of a looser, kind of wetter paint. So we're going to see how this is going to work. Karen says, gosh, that looks like a tile. Cool. Yeah, I think it's neat. This is a lot. I think it's a lot of fun. I was watching a documentary the other night on how Moroccan concrete tiles were made, and it was pretty fascinating. All right. So hopefully y'all are having a good day. I'm having a pretty good day. I had some work to do this morning, and that kind of derailed stuff. But my plans, because originally I was going to start bright and early with y'all, but there was stuff on deadline that I had to do that I couldn't wait. All right, and then I'm going to do another one, and this is kind of a similar pattern, but just slightly different. And again, I'm working pretty quickly, and I'm really curious to see how this is going to look because I love this pink and purple combination. It almost goes orange, which is pretty wild. Pink and orange are much more related than a lot of people think. Chromatically, they're very similar. And sometimes if you look at certain shades of pink under a black light, they look orange, and vice versa. So it's pretty wild. But that's a whole other thing about color theory. But looking at it through the lens of another kind of artifice. So, anyways, again, I'm having fun and experimenting. This is using the gel press to kind of create patterns on top of the collages. And I'm curious to see what the artifact of the underneath layer, which is a green layer, and how that's going to translate to this pink and purple layer. Because sometimes the colors mix and they get super muddy, and that's not necessarily awesome. But again, it's just an underneath layer. So if I don't like something, I can always paint over it. And that's one of those things where if you feel like a paralysis and you get what I call the fear of the blank canvas, and you're like, oh, I don't know what to make. I'm afraid of ruining this canvas. The first thing I would suggest is just make a mess. Take a cup of coffee and dump it on it, or splatter it with some paint so it ruins that kind of pristine, expanse of unblemished whiteness. And then you're less likely to clench up and kind of be protective of that pristineness if it already gets kind of ruined up a little bit, as I say sometimes. So you do have to work quick, because if this dries, it's not going to have the best impression. I'm also trying not to get paint all over William's office. I see Michelle is watching. Hi, Michelle. Oh, that's the dirty one. The clean one is not that clean. It's a little bit dirty, but that's all right. All right, so this one, I'm using the gel press to add a layer on top of this 100 series. I was kind of toying around this idea of calling it Wild and Precious, but then I just called something Wildwood. So I don't know, but that's kind of off of that Mary Oliver quote, that poem that she wrote about what are you going to do with your one wild and precious life. And I think that's fun, kind of like a fish scale. Ooh, I kind of dig that. It's definitely muddy for sure, but I kind of dig it. Now, every once in a while, if I want to clean this off, and again, I don't want to ruin it up, I take a plain piece of paper, and that adheres differently than the collages. The collages, they kind of don't, the paint doesn't stick to them as well because it's not as porous because it's been covered in the glue and stuff. And I'm burnishing the surface of this so that has a better adhesion and a little bit more surface area contact. And hopefully it will pull all of the old paint off. That's the goal. And I'm going to pay particular notice to the edges because I feel like the edges are the ones that get the most like crusty. So that didn't work hardly at all, but that's all right. So that didn't work at all, but that's all right. So I'm just going to leave it on there, and it's just going to be there, and it'll be embedded into the next round that I do. I'm going to go because I've been on for about an hour now. So what time is it now? It is almost 7 o'clock. So 7 to 8, 8 to 9. So let's meet back around 9 o'clock and we can talk about some of the next layers that I'm going to add to these pieces. How about it? So 9 o'clock, and we'll meet back and look at some of the new layers. I like these. This is like this blue, that kind of subtle bluish green peeking through, and that orangey. This is super muddy, but I think that kind of almost looks, I don't know. There's something about that I really like. And then this one is not anything particularly interesting right now, but it will be later. There's a little bit of something happening, and it's peeking through. I think that looks fun. All right, see y'all later for check-in number 3.